My top 21 tips on evaluating an innovation agency. G'day, it's Nils Vesk from Ideas with Legs. First up, what's an innovation agency and what do they do? Well, generally people use one of 5 terms for external experts who innovate for companies. They are 1, an innovation agency, 2, innovation consultancy, 3, innovation company, 4, innovation strategy consultant, and 5, innovation consulting firms. And well, they're all pretty much mean the same thing. Now, while there might be some differences in their approach to innovation, the goal is the same: to help you create a product, process, or service innovation that improves the result of an organization. But the most significant difference between these 5 groups would be innovation strategy consultant. And this is where a consulting group focuses mostly on the strategic plan and strategy of where and how they should innovate, but without giving them step-by-step support or implementation. It's kind of like being given an unfinished IKEA instruction book to build your innovation. Now, for the technically minded, it's a great help, but for others, it just creates frustration. Now, for ease in this video, I'm going to refer to all innovation agency variations with the inclusive name of innovation agency. Now, you might be thinking, why use an innovation agency? Well, most people use an innovation agency when they have a problem that they haven't been able to solve themselves. Now, that problem might be having an ailing product that no longer has the market's attention and those sales are dropping continually. It might be that a new competing product has entered the market and it's just better in so many different ways and it's outcompeting their new product or their existing product. Maybe the aesthetics of a product has lost its customer appeal and the sales are being affected. An organization's product or service just looks exactly the same as its competitors and they're now competing on price at the cost of losing profits. Perhaps the quality has dropped, or maybe the organization is not identifying or capitalizing on those sort of emerging future trends or technology. Maybe the customer journey or user experience sucks. It's not streamlined and it's just causing complaint after complaint and not creating referrals or additional sales. Or maybe, and this is kind of a common one, a company has just hit the ceiling with their results and they can't see any new ways to create new growth. Or the organization's processes are just not effective as they could be. Gee, yeah, there are a few, and there are more, but that gives you a good overview. Now, an innovation agency is not the only one that can solve these problems. You can. Yes, you can, with a little bit of help from someone like us. Now, what makes an innovation agency so good at solving your problems is that they have a diverse group of professionals who look at your situation from a different perspective. In fact, I wrote a complete book on the most common innovation archetypes that exist. You should check it out. My mum tells me it's a bestseller in Timbuktu, and it's called Innovation Archetypes. Now, in this book, I talk about there are 12 particular and I guess general innovation archetypes but the good news is that we can all learn the critical innovation behaviors that these professional innovators use. And you can probably begin to see that when you start to think of, let's say, the mindset of a futurist, if we could borrow that mindset or borrow the mindset of, say, for example, a scientist who's validating and testing, or if we could borrow from the mindset of, say, a behavioralist who's trying to work out how someone thinks, or looking into the archetype of someone like the marketer and how do we create tribes and people who are into our viral messages. When we can step into these shoes and realize that these are just several mindsets, we can borrow those mindsets and methods and behaviors and apply them to ourselves for success. Or you could employ each one of them individually to join your organization. It's probably going to cost you a fair bit of money. Or you could hire an innovation agency to do it for you, which can still be fairly expensive. Now, I probably shouldn't be so dismissive of my fellow innovation consultancies. After all, we're just in business, just like you are. But this is kind of why innovation agencies' fees can range easily from $100,000 well into the $1 million range. I mean, think of it this way. If you're already going to be into the $1 million price range, if you have to hire 12 new high-level staff for 12 months. So it kind of helps to give you a perspective of that. Now, innovation agencies' fees, however, are kind of small compared to the profits that they can create. If you were to look at the most innovative companies in the world over the last 15 years, you'll probably find that they've consistently delivered a higher shareholder return than the rest of the global market. In fact, it's a whole 2 percentage points every year. That means innovation pays dividends. So whether you want to innovate on your own, like an innovation agency, or want to go out and hire one, there are 4 critical areas that you want to consider. Insights and strategy, which is about discovering emerging trends to capitalize on, or to identify an unmet or ignored customer need, desire, and frustration. This stage also includes your traditional innovation strategy, what you need to stop doing, what you continue, and what you need to start next. The second phase is about ideation, which is about creating lots of ideas to solve the problems and create superior alternatives and better outcomes than what's out there in the market. The third phase is about validation. It's where we test whether a market's willing to pay for the solution. We can test that the problem is worth solving and that our solution that we've come up with effectively solves the problem. And we can do that inexpensively without wasting a lot of time or effort, and we eliminate the risk. And the fourth phase is the commercialization and execution phase. It's where we're constructing, pitching, marketing, and distributing the finished innovation most cost effectively. Now, here's the top 21 things you should ask and expect from an innovation agency, and use this list to help evaluate the capabilities of your potential innovation agency, or even use it to prompt you and your own team to innovate just as well as they do. Here are the 4 top things you should ask and expect from an innovation agency in the insight and strategy phase. First is having a comprehensive list of the emerging trends that will impact your customer, industry, and sales. Now, a future world scenario plan is the next thing that comes along, and that's something that will identify the 4 most likely scenarios that will play out due to these emerging trends, as well as drivers and uncertainties. And this is usually drawn as a quadrant. The third component is about creating a contingency plan to capitalize on each one of those scenarios. And the fourth thing is a list of the most ignored, unmet customer needs, frustrations, or desires to be capitalized on. Now, there are also 3 things that you should ask and expect from the innovation agency in regards to ideation, that is, idea generation. And I would start with trying to get a really extensive list. I'm saying a minimum of 100 ideas. Yes, it sounds like a lot, but it's not that hard to respond to a customer or a future trend insight. This might be for a new product or service idea, an improvement, or a process rethink. The second thing that you want to have is a sorting process tool that enables you to objectively quickly assess ideas based on a number of criteria. 1, the tactical criteria, that is how well the idea responds to an insight. 2, the technical criteria, that is how many unknowns there are and whether you have the technical skills to solve them. 3 is the financial criteria, that is the depth of the market's pockets and the rewards versus the risks. And finally, we want to have a short list of these ideas based on the idea sorting criteria. Okay, the next thing that we want is we should have 7 questions that we should ask and expect from an innovation agency in the validation prototyping phase. And the first thing around that would be to have a list of their suggested ways to validate that the problem that's been identified is one that the market truly wants solved. 2, a list of their suggested ways to validate that the market is willing to pay for a solution to the identified problem, and that needs to be objectively based, so it's based on visitation numbers and some data. And 3, we want to look at the creation or assistance in creating and running validation experiments to test demand. 4, we want some suggested plans to check that we can validate the prototype that we've created will actually effectively solve the problem. And then 5, we want some creation or assistance in the construction or the outsourcing of constructing a prototype or validation. And 6, we want to do some objective user testing, which has got non-biased interview questions and observation after the people have used the prototype. And finally, we want feedback improvement and suggestions to retest, including some UX, user experience improvements. Okay, we're almost there. Now we want the top 7 things that you should expect from an innovation agency in the commercialization and execution phase. So we have production, quality, and logistical recommendations. We'd be looking for some things around some technical recommendations that kind of make sense and some support around that. 3, we'd probably need some outsourcing advice, evaluation. 4, pricing, affordability, structure, maybe a timeline. 5, how to create a unique value proposition for the product. 6, a community or tribe building strategy. And 7, distribution, partnership, opportunity kind of situations and some ideas around that one. Okay, so let's wrap this up. I've hit you with a few different ideas, but you can innovate consistently, predictably, and effectively as a professional innovation agency like ours. It won't happen overnight, but if you can follow some of the simple sort of steps or prompts that I've been sharing about, you can start to read between the lines or read one of our latest books to understand how to do it. But primarily, there are 4 critical phases of that innovation. Now, you could hire across a range of innovation archetypes and have them work together to create innovation. This actually is easier than you think if you work in a huge company. And we've got a really simple, cool diagnostic tool that you can use if you're interested to see what skills and behaviours your team may already have or might be missing and what you do need. You could hire an innovation manager to implement an innovation strategy and facilitate innovation across the phases of innovation. But very few innovation managers actually end up in the role of innovation manager with any real innovation training. And that means that they're winging it and that the innovation that they try to work on often, unfortunately, never eventuates with any serious returns or results for the organisation or for the individual. Now, if you're an innovation manager who's struggling to understand innovation but don't have the budget for a consultancy like ours, consider perhaps our innovation membership group, thereinventionclub.com, or we also have some amazing little programs out there. Now, you could always hire an innovation agency like us, and we'd be happy to teach you how to innovate from scratch. And we'll also show you some of our proven strategies that we've worked around the world. We have over 60 of them that have got flow-to-flow charts, videos, and workshops that work across all 4 phases of innovation. Now, if you do choose to go with an innovation agency, whoever they may be clear about your expectations and make sure you use our list of the 21 things that you should expect from an innovation agency to ensure that you get the service and you support that you deserve. So thanks for tuning in. Again, if you like some of the innovation hacks I shared, you're going to love my latest book, The Reinvention Sprint. See you next time. And if you like it, please subscribe.